Pleasant good evening to everyone who has joined us once again for our next episode of Grenada Matters, a pursuit to justice. We have Mrs. Herricia Willis, attorney at law, and we also have a next special guest, Mr. Clifford Bascombe, who is here with us. Myself and Ingram would be guiding the conversation tonight as usual, and we thank each and every person that has clicked on, as we have a very important and ongoing matter that has been brought to the public over the last 6 or 7 months right here in the beloved Spice Isle, Grenada. There is currently an asylum seeker came from the motherland, which is in Africa, and he came seeking the assistance of the Grenadian government from persecution from his home country. Unfortunately, even in 2020, despite all the official recommendations from the United Nations, the government of Grenada has failed to implement laws that that bring procedures to secure asylum seekers and persons who seek refuge from persecution. According to Section 14, Article 14 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is a right, a basic and fundamental human right of all persons, all human beings, living and breathing human beings, who have that right to seek asylum in any country, right? From persecution, because the sorry, life is important, right? Life is important, and it is recognized that life is important. And many times we would have to flee our countries just to survive. We have had many asylum seekers come into Grenada over the years. We have even had Grenadian nationals who have sought asylum elsewhere in various countries. It is very disheartening to know that a gentleman who came to Grenada, the beautiful Spice Isle that has been marketed as a place of peace and harmony and loving the brother's keeper and a Christian nation, would actually take a gentleman who came here seeking some security and lock him up in Her Majesty's prison since last year, August 2019. Since then, nothing has been done on the path of the government exhibiting any care or concern for this gentleman's right to seek asylum. Nothing has been done to care for this gentleman's right as a human being to try to survive that persecution that he faced. Of course, because the matter of seeking asylum is so sensitive, there are certain things that cannot be brought into the public domain. But we today, once again, will offer as much information that we can to assure the public, the general public, that this gentleman's fight for survival, this gentleman's fight to go through the correct process of seeking asylum here in Grenada is actually genuine. And we are calling on the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, and the wider world to please just listen to what we're saying on behalf of this gentleman and other asylum seekers elsewhere. It could be one of us that would be trying to go to England or Canada or Trinidad or even America to seek asylum based on the corruption and victimization that we now face here in Grenada under the same government. So we have Ms. Herrica Willis with us, attorney at law, who's also representing this gentleman, this asylum seeker. And it is a very proud moment, although it is very depressing. It seems as though the government continues to neglect all efforts that are being made by the attorney and by other persons who have brought this information to light. But it is a very proud moment to see that we are now joined by Mr. Clifford Bascombe. We still have Miss Herricia Willis on a constant basis, trying to ensure that this gentleman is treated fairly like a human being. Miss Willis, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Earl. Thank you very much for inviting me. Good evening, good night, everybody. I would first of all like to extend my client's thank you to everybody. He is humbled by the attention at last he's receiving after over 500 days of being incarcerated. In his own words, it has been a living hell. Fortunately, as a result of everyone's care, his position is slightly improved. I have today delivered drinking water to him, but he confirms he is in a better place than he was several months ago. But he's still being incarcerated. He's still been incarcerated and not being released. And more importantly, the government, the state, has not responded to our requests to release our brother. Of course, everybody knows the United Nations has issued our brother a certificate to say he's a protected person. But of course, the United Nations is an international party and cannot interfere with the internal affairs of a country. So our brother is asking for your help. He's already thanked me, and I'm thanking you on behalf of him. This is in relation to the petition, which I've checked just half an hour ago, and we've had over 438 signatures. Our first goal of 100 signatures has been achieved since last week. We had set a deadline of the 26th of November to present the petition to the government, to the United Nations, and to the International Red Cross. However, many individuals have still not signed and have requested an extension of time to do so. This is because some still is not able to access our petition or be able to sign. So Earl and Rubbermaid is kind enough to show everybody the petition. So for another 2 weeks at least, we will give you a further update after this, but the petition will be ready for you to sign and share. So please continue to help us. And we have really appreciated everyone, every single 438 individuals who have had the opportunity to sign. Thank you. And we're thanking the others in advance who are there ready and waiting to access the petition. Thank you very much.
Now, I must say, Miss Willis, that based on my understanding, the United Nations department, Human Rights Department from Washington, they have used their resources, which is much more than Grenada has, to investigate the individual who is seeking asylum here in Grenada. And based on their investigations, the United Nations has issued such a certificate saying that the gentleman is now protected and should be treated as an asylee. Am I correct?
That is correct. They've
Okay,
issued that certificate in June 2020.
right.
They, they interviewed him several times before that and verified what he has told them. And that certificate actually says that he's protected from being deported back to his birth country.
Now I'm very concerned, especially as many persons may not be aware. That is why I believe that it was very imperative that we informed the people that an investigation was done, and it was not only done by local persons and authority. It was done by the United Nations, a group of countries that came together and started the United Nations, and they have used their resources, and they have said that this gentleman should be treated as an asylum seeker. But yet, for all, we have this gentleman here housed in Her Majesty's prison since last year, August 2019, over 500 days, I believe, in a filthy facility such as Her Majesty's prison, a place for criminals, convicted criminals. Now, it is very absurd, I must say, although people on the panel might not be able to comment. But for me, it is very absurd that we continue to see almost weekly that many persons of different nationalities, of skin tones closer to Caucasian, they have been investigated. They are known to be international fugitives and so on. And the Grenadian government has been issuing Grenadian passports to these individuals. But here we have a gentleman who has been investigated by the United Nations. And apparently, it is due to the fact that this gentleman cannot afford to pay in that and to be a part of that CBI program that is being promoted by the Prime Minister's office. So that, to me, as a citizen of Grenada, it is very absurd that we continue to accept so many criminals. And it begs the question, what type of investigations or what resources are going into the CBI offices that are issuing Grenadian passports? Why is it that these international criminals, these known international criminals, based on investigations outside of Grenada, why have they not been incarcerated just like this asylum seeker? Why have they been issued Grenadian passports? And I would also like to know, how long does it take someone to come with $20,000 and get a Grenadian passport? Because this gentleman has been in Her Majesty's prison for over 500 days. And based on my knowledge, many of these persons closer to the Caucasian tone, the race, they do not take as long as a month once they present cash to the CBI office to get the official passport. But that is my take on it. And it is very absurd, as I said, it is very disheartening. It is an embarrassment to Grenada, especially as the United Nations has recommended to the Grenadian government that laws for asylum seekers should have been implemented since over the years, over the last decade. It has been an issue that has been raised through the United Nations meetings, which we have our public officials going, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and so on. So it begs the question, what is really happening in that Parliament House there? What type of laws are they passing? Are they really doing a good job? Is this man being treated fairly? Should we be treating persons who are just simply trying to stay alive? Should we be treating them in such a manner, a dehumanizing manner? We have also with us Mr. Clifford Bascombe, who saw the petition. He found out about this tragedy of how we are treating a fellow African. And Mr. Clifford Bascombe came on as a layman, as a citizen of Grenada, and he did a video. And I could have seen the emotions coming from Mr. Bascombe. And this is something that has been exhibited. That sense, that human privilege of empathy and love for a next human being. Putting ourselves in that gentleman's shoes and saying 500 days in Richmond Hill prison, it is unacceptable. Mr. Bascombe, how are you today, sir? Is Mr. Bascombe there?
As you say with my brother.
Mr. Bascombe, it is a pleasure once again to speak with you. Also, Mr. Bascombe, I want to thank you. We have had Canadian citizens who have come forward willing to assist this process, to ensure that this gentleman is treated fairly. And unlike a criminal, which he has not been convicted of any criminal offenses in Grenada. So it is a privilege to have you here, Mr. Bascombe. We have seen your video where you have pleaded to the government to allow this gentleman, please, just allow him to go through the process. Just allow him to feel like a human being. Mr. Bascombe, my question to you is, how did you feel upon hearing about this very sad situation?
I felt really, really bad because it is our brother. He is my brother from another mother. So I feel like pain still. At the end of the day, it's my brother.
And you are very correct. We are all one. We are all one. We are all human beings.
Yeah.
We are all human beings, Mr.
Yeah.
Bascombe.
All I'm asking, what I really want, and I'm asking the people, please, anyway over the world you are, please, please, I am asking you just to read the petition and please sign it. Please, we need to get this man out of Richmond Hill prison. That is all I'm asking on this platform. I am begging, I'm asking. It is free. You don't have to pay to sign that petition. It is free. I am asking, please, everybody, just put hand and do like if it is your mother's son. And just sign that petition, please, please, please. Help a brother, please. If your neighbor house is on fire, throw a bucket on the neighbor and throw some on yours. Please, please, that's all I'm asking is let us get this man out of prison. I know for myself, I had a brother that went to Canada and he seeks asylum and then he was never treated so. Back in 1983. I know about it. He was never treated like that. So please, please, let us see what we can do to help this brother. Please sign the petition. Thank you.
And that petition that we're asking persons to sign, there is relevant information on it, the petition. There is sufficient information. The attorney for the gentleman went as far as to securing five sponsors for the gentleman to ease the burden off of the taxpayers. And I say ease the burden off of the taxpayers for the sole reason being that as long as this gentleman remains in the custody of the Canadian government at Her Majesty's prison, He will have to be fed, and this money comes out from the taxpayers' money. Besides that, we have to also look at the fact that the prison is already overcrowded, and putting many more persons in the prison who do not belong there is actually placing a strain on the prison officials and the prison officers. It is a very sad situation. 5 sponsors have been recommended to the government of Grenada. 5 legitimate sponsors have been recommended to the government of Grenada, but they have denied the request. They have denied the request, although I believe this is what they had asked for after approximately 11 or 12 months of this gentleman being there. Now, this would be his second Christmas spending in Her Majesty's prison if he remains there any longer than December 24th or 25th. This would be his second Christmas at Her Majesty's prison. The conditions are horrible, and the prison is overcrowded. It now has approximately 470 persons at Her Majesty's prison, plus 1 asylum seeker who has not been convicted of any criminal offense. Now, one may ask, Mr. Bascombe, one may ask, what crime has this gentleman committed to be placed in Her Majesty's prison? And this gentleman escaped from his death. He escaped from persecution. And he came
Yeah.
to Grenada through a vessel and presented himself to the Red Cross building, the Red Cross officials, where he reasonably believed that he could be able to seek asylum. Now, many times we have to remind the people of Grenada that this gentleman could have come into Grenada without going through immigration and customs and disappeared and blended in among the general population. But instead, this gentleman went to the Red Cross building and presented himself. He asked for directions to the Red Cross building and said, "Here I am. I am an asylum seeker. I need the help of the Grenadian people." He was then charged by members of the RGPF for entering the country illegally. He was given no credit for presenting himself. He was not found on the streets. He was not found by our officials because someone called in and tipped them off and said to them, "Listen, we have a man from Ghana who is staying in St. Paul's or in Karakou, who is hiding from the government." This gentleman presented himself. And it says to me, that says to me, Mr. Bascom, that this gentleman's situation must be very genuine, seeing that he presented
Yeah,
himself and he tried
it
to
is
go
genuine.
through, yeah, that he tried to go through the situation. Now,
Yeah,
Mr. Bascom, it is a very sad situation. It is very touching knowing that one is at Her Majesty's prison there over 500 days. You are Grenadian. You have heard of all the horrific stories of persons who would
yeah,
have been incarcerated, especially busmen from Grandant and so on, who would have been sent to the prison. Could you just
yeah.
tell us some of, at least one of the stories that you heard of there, besides the overcrowding and so forth?
Well, I heard it is overcrowded and it should have, I think, is 5% to a cell.
Hmm.
And I think there is about 8 or 9% to a cell.
Uh-huh.
Also, in the night, if one want to ease himself
Uh-huh.
by using I heard it's a pill. So if
Uh-huh.
one person use that pail he have to stay till morning, and then the other one have to go and pee over that feces. So whole night you inhaling that. Oh my God, it's ridiculous. It is.
It is. It
And
is.
that pail that
It
has
is.
stayed till morning,
Uh-huh.
another this have to be like urinated over that feces. Could you imagine inhaling that whole night? Oh my God.
As a citizen of Grenada, Mr. Bascom, if
Mm.
you had the opportunity to speak to those in authority about this gentleman's situation, what would you ask them to do, or what would you recommend that the Grenadian government does for this gentleman who is seeking asylum?
I will ask them to work with the man, please. There is people that want to help already, that will give the man a job, house him and everything like that, take care of him. There's people waiting with willing hands already to help the man. We got to help our brother. It's a brother. You cannot just have him in incarceration for all the how much, 500 days. That
Yes,
is
that is
nothing
correct.
for him. We have to help this man. The United Nations said he's not a threat. He has no record. Come on, let us work hand in hand and help a brother. That's all we ask for.
I do agree, Mr. Bascom. I very much do agree with your recommendation. And unfortunately, this is what has been presented to the Grenadian government for the last 8 or 9 months after finding out that an asylum seeker was left at Her Majesty's prison for a total period of 9 months with nothing happening. And this gentleman came in months before COVID. This gentleman would not be staying in Grenada as the United Nations is looking for a next country to allow the gentleman to go to. And that is that is because of the reason, due to the reason that the Grenadian government has refused, they have blatantly refused to accept the recommendation of the United Nations, which is to implement laws for asylum seekers. Now, remember, I said that this gentleman is not the first asylum seeker that has come to Grenada. Although the public might not be aware of such a case, this is not the first person that came to seek asylum here in Grenada. In fact, we have had persons who came to Grenada to seek asylum before this African brother, and they were successful in seeking asylum. It must also be mentioned that this is not the first time an asylum seeker came to Grenada and was treated in such inhumane way. Now, I remember during the COVID period, there was a gentleman who came to Grenada from Cameroon who was not aware of what the laws were as it relates to seeking asylum. And that gentleman tried traveling to Trinidad from Grenada. And that gentleman was sent back from Trinidad as the laws have it. The first port of entry is where the person would have to establish that they are seeking asylum. So that gentleman was sent back from Trinidad, and the recommendation was that he needs to go to the Grenadian authorities and allow them, let them know that he is an asylum seeker. So that gentleman came back to Grenada on a plane, and he presented his documents, his passport, and everything, and informed them that he's an asylum seeker. He was not aware, as many Grenadians, including myself, who are not aware of the laws that governs our countries, right? This gentleman said all he knows is that he's trying to escape persecution. He's trying to escape trying to be murdered. But instead of assisting the gentleman or treating the manner, this gentleman was incarcerated at Central Police Station for over 1 month, with the authorities being aware that this gentleman was there. Now, thanks to the assistance of Attorney at Law Ms. Herricia Willis, who we are privileged to have here with us today, that gentleman was free, right? He's now going through the process. So, Ms. Willis, you have been working very hard to keep the noses of Grenadians up, as we have many persons in authority who continue to embarrass us, who continue to ensure that a lot of irrelevant and illegalities consistently happen here in Grenada, that a lot of human rights are being violated. I do know that one of the reasons we are very appreciative of you, Miss Willis, and of Clifford Bascombe, Mr. Bascombe, it is because we have a lot of human rights bodies here in Grenada. We have 14 registered political parties in Grenada, including the government. We have other non-governmental organizations who you and I have personally written to on separate platforms. And these persons have not responded. They have refused to respond. They have not tried to ensure that the right thing is done. So, Ms. Willis, Mr. Bascombe, how does it feel?
Well, Earl, I must say something very important. I've been sitting here listening to you. You have confirmed that the United Nations are involved, but I think the public needs to know Grenada has not enacted any laws at all. That is why the United Nations, in fact, it's the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in Washington. They step in and deal with asylum seekers in Grenada. So what happens when an asylum seeker touches the shores of Grenada and goes to the Red Cross? There's an agreement with the Red Cross and the United Nations and the Grenadian government that Red Cross will contact the government and the government will process the individual, that is to complete forms. And the United Nations is the body that investigates. Because Grenada does not have any laws, they are not under any obligation to take this individual on. So what happens and what will happen in this instance, when an individual is given a certificate, the United Nations finds them another country to live in. They do not. My client will not stay in Grenada. Presently, the United Nations is finding a human right friendly country for him to be it then. So this is more horrifying because he needs not be in the prison. As you've kindly told everybody, Earl, 5 sponsors has come forward to me. They have said, one said they will provide accommodation. The second said they'll provide employment. They will pay this gentleman so the gentleman could assist the individual who's having accommodation, i.e. provide for rent or subsidiaries or something. The Red Cross provided a letter to say they will provide clothing and other subsidiaries for him. Then we have yourself, Earl, your organization has offered assistance. And one other sponsor has said, if none of the others cannot help with something this gentleman wants, they would provide. All 5 letters were given to the government. They have not responded to me, and this was in October. So there is no reason for the taxpayers to be paying for this gentleman to be incarcerated in such conditions. The government can release him, but they are holding on to the fact that they've charged him, they've taken him from a Red Cross office, which is, might as well say it's like the church, and charged him for illegal entry, just so they can incarcerate him. He does not need, it is not necessary for him to be in prison. This is why there is a petition going. So I understand there's a rumor that he just wants to stay in Grenada. No, he will not. He does not want to stay in Grenada. The United Nations are sourcing another country. So why will the state not release our brother? They have not responded to no one's request or given a full explanation, only that he's in the country illegally.
Now, thank you for that, Ms. Willis. Mr. Bascombe. Mr. Bascombe, are you still with us? All right, it seems as though we may have lost Mr. Bascombe. Now, Ms. Willis, as an attorney at law, the government's argument is that the gentleman was incarcerated.
Mr. Bascombe's on the line.
Could you repeat that, please?
Mr. Bascombe? Mr. Bascombe, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bascombe, my question to you is, if your life was in danger here in Grenada, and I myself and a group of other persons decided to hunt you and try to cut your head off, as we have happening in those countries, or light you a fire whilst you're alive and throw bushes over you and light you a fire, what would you do to stay alive? Would you stay in the country? Would you travel from let's say St. George to St. Patrick's and feel safe, or what would you do? Would you try to flee the country?
I will flee. I'll flee from the country.
My next question to you, Mr. Bascombe. Now, if you did not have a proper plane ticket or the finances, or you were aware that I was able to track you on a plane, for instance, if you purchased a ticket, what would you do to stay alive?
But listen, a man running you down with a cutlass. You will study. What you go do? You ain't running for shelter. You ain't busting down somebody do and going for shelter.
I would definitely do that, Mr. Bascombe. But
Yeah,
no what
You ain't no time for no passport. You ain't no time for no plane ticket, you know.
No, what it seems,
it's an emergency.
it seems as though, Mr. Bascombe, that the laws or saying that if someone is attacking me with a cutlass, I should not try to break into somewhere to survive, to escape that cutlass blade from severing the flesh,
Yeah.
or did we just stay and face it? It is we have some comments, Mr. Bascom. Please allow me to read a few of the comments, and a blessed afternoon, a blessed evening to everyone who is here. Um,
Yeah.
I'll start by reading one comment which says, "We lack black knowledge on who we are. Our European educational system won't allow us to understand why we have to stay for each other as a race." That is very correct. There is a next comment that has many sad faces, even tears coming from the faces. And those two persons have shown us that they are aware of what empathy is. They do possess that human gift of empathy, of putting themselves in a brother's shoe. Someone is saying that, can we share visuals to the people so they can have a better idea of why people run from countries, right? And the thing is, we can go on YouTube. I encourage persons to go and do research and see what is happening in African countries, see what is happening with all the wars and so forth. They question. There's also a statement: we do not have a human rights organization in Grenada, and if we do, it is very weak. And I would like to add that we do have a human rights organization in Grenada, but it is extremely weak, not just very weak, extremely weak. It is almost non existent and non functional. Um, Ingram, yes, sir.
Um, I want to say this much. All the human rights people, organizations in Grenada have been an embarrassment. They how can they even be operational while this man is in prison? The whole point of the human rights is they're there. They should be supporting and helping this man. What have they been doing? What are they doing in Grenada? How are they supporting this man? How have they been helping people like Miss Herricia Willis? They are an embarrassment and they need to be named and shamed because they're an embarrassment to Grenada. Absolute embarrassment. That's all I wanted to say.
Now, I also want to add, someone was asking for the petition. I just posted the petition on the Facebook page. It is a link there. Um, Please disregard the part that speaks about financial contributions. All we need are just the signatures. Unfortunately, the option, the person who set up the petition, apparently they were unable to disregard the part about persons to look past that. We don't want the finances. What we want are the signatures, and in there that is asking, or why is it that you're supporting such a petition? So, Ingram, let me pull up the petition. Oh, lovely. So, Ingram has the petition right there. It's on change.org. It's a cry freedom for African asylum seeker imprisoned for seeking refuge in Grenada. Once again, there it is right there. It says sign the petition. Just put in your name, email address, sign the petition. If anything comes up about any financial contributions, please disregard that section of the petition. It was only there because the option was not to remove it. There is information also on the petition that has been published. Again, court documents have been filed, all the information that we are able and that we are now informing the people of. This is factual. This has been passed through court via affidavit. We are actually seeking the assistance of people. Please. sign this petition so we could pass it on to the Minister of National Security, Dr. Right Honorable Keith Mitchell. We do hope that the voices of the masses will be heard. We have also on separate occasions on different platforms, myself, a human rights activist, Miss Willis, as an attorney at law and attorney for the gentleman, Mr. Clifford Bascombe, Miss Rolanda McQueen, Miss Ingram Jones, Miss Jeanette has also engaged persons in offices, high office, asking for changes to be made. I have personally written to the Minister of National Security 7 months ago, 7 months ago, whilst I was stuck in Antigua due to the COVID pandemic, asking that the Minister of National Security please pay attention to this tragedy, this chaotic behavior, this inhumane incarceration, this unjustified collapse of democracy. But the Minister of National Security, even to date, has refused to respond to this one lone voice. And this is why we are asking the public, the masses, to do us the favor, to favor of being our brother's keeper, and please sign this petition so that we can present it to of national security, and he would see that the masses are saying that we need proper procedures for persons who are merely trying to save their lives, persons who are trying to escape persecution, persons who do not fancy being murdered. In fact, I do not know any person who would fancy being murdered. Everyone would run. Everyone would try to save their lives. Mr. Clifford Bascombe, sir. Mr. Bascombe,
Yes, my brother.
again, I want to thank you for the time that you took off, the video that you did, the appeal that you did to the people. I want to thank you. We have not had Grenada Human Rights Organization, who is being paid by the United Nations to stand for the rights, the human rights of persons in Grenada. We have not had any videos like what you did for that gentleman. Although we have the GHRO in Grenada to stand on human rights for persons in Grenada. It doesn't matter your nationality. Once you are in Grenada, even the Constitution guarantees you fundamental rights and freedoms, including included in Chapter 1 of the Grenada Constitution, the right to a fair trial. I must say that I am privileged to speak without any muzzle or any censorship. I will only speak that which is factual. Now, that gentleman was brought to court without an attorney to represent him. He was brought to court and prosecuted by the state representative, who is a trained legal mind. Mr. Bascom, are you hearing me? That gentleman was brought to court and he had to defend himself against a
Yeah.
trained operative of the government, someone who is legally trained. But the Constitution of Grenada says that every person in Grenada has the right to a fair trial. Mr. Bascom, would you consider that fair if you were not able or not an attorney to go to court and to fight a case such as this one, or any case as a matter of fact? against a trained legal mind, you as a layman, would you consider that to be fair?
It could never be. I could never find a word to explain that. It cannot be. That is what I just
You and
call
I both.
in high place.
You and I both.
Also, I'm not hearing the conference of
You and
churches.
I both.
I'm hearing them.
And it, mhm. Agreed, Mr. Bascombe. Agreed. Agreed.
I'm not hearing them.
Once again,
If it was,
with a
if it was
gentleman
a white man,
incarcerated.
Indian, Caucasian, they would have taken care of him.
Agreed, Mr. Bascombe. I fully agree. I cannot find the words to describe undemocratic occurrence. I cannot find the words. So again, an attorney, Ms. Herricia Willis, attorney at law, found out about the gun 9 months after he was incarcerated. And she stepped up to the game. She stepped up and she is now acting on behalf of the gentleman, despite how many attempts, the government continues to neglect its duties. It continues to neglect the recommendations of the United Nations. It continues to neglect humanity, morality, constitution, justice, preservance of life. It continues to do so. And I am certain that with your assistance, with sharing the petition, and signing the petition, as Mr. Clifford Bascombe has asked in his short video posted on Facebook, Ms. Herricia Willis has continued to ask local media, please sign the petition and let the government of Grenada know that we find this very intolerable. We find this very inhumane, that we recognize one day ourselves or our children may have to try to escape persecution from one country and run to a next. And this is not how we expect them to be treated, right? It does not take 500 days to pass a law that would guarantee an asylum seeker to be treated as a human being or as an asylum seeker. It does not take 500 days. In fact, let us remember Grenada. It only took a couple days for the law to be passed on seat belts, making seat belts mandatory. And for the law to be passed, persons may not motor vehicles whilst using cell phones. It only took a few days. After years of having the recommendation of implementing laws for asylum seekers right here in Grenada, after years, it has not been done. Although we have had asylum seekers here in the past, although we have had 2 asylum seekers brought to the attention of the public here in Grenada during COVID 7 months ago, there has been no attempts to implement any laws. In fact, the Minister of Foreign Affairs went onto national TV and made it seem as though it was close to impossible to implement a law. But Grenada, remember how easy it was to implement VAT and other taxes and every other law that is convenient to the persons in authority. Remember, Grenada, remember, we must stand united for causes that will bring positive effect to the human race. Grenada has a reputation to protect, that reputation of harmony and love and peace. Those in authority need to be reminded by the voices of the masses that we would like that reputation to be upheld, that we would like it to be passed on. The people are very powerful. The people, once united, can never go wrong. Once we stand for what is just and we do God's will. In the Constitution of Grenada, the supreme law of the land, it says that the Constitution is based on the supreme being. It is based on the principles of the supreme being. This is where morality comes in. Although there may not be any laws for asylum seekers, in particular, at this present time, there is need for humanity. There is also Chapter 1 of the Constitution, which guarantees any person, foreign or local, fundamental rights and freedoms. Constitution of Grenada, Chapter 1. Let us please say a prayer for this gentleman who remains 500 days and counting at Her Majesty's prison. Let us say a prayer for those in authority who continue to make the worst of mistakes, or even sometimes even choose to make these unnecessary mistakes, these embarrassments. Let us say a prayer tonight, asking the Supreme Being, our Lord, to please guide them and allow them to make the right choices, as they are the ones in authority. They are our representatives. I myself would not like to be placed in a situation where I tried escaping for my life, where I tried escaping murder, being murdered, and I was greeted with handcuffs and sent to Her Majesty's prison. Mr. Bascombe, do you have any final words for the persons who are here with us tonight? Ingram?
Yep,
Right, is Mr. Bascombe still with us?
he's still with us.
Okay. Mr. Bascombe, any final words?
Yes, yes. I must say thanks very much for inviting me on the show again. Ms. Willis, thank you very much. The co-hosts, Mr. Angus and you, Mr. Maitland, and the listening public, I thank you very much for listening in, and all who signed the petition already and all who is about to sign. Please, let us work with this young man. Let us help him, please. He's a brother from another mother, and he's from the motherland. Let us help him. Africa, please, God bless you. Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Bascombe. Thank you very much for taking up the mantle of trying to assist this gentleman with seeing something happening, right? Seeing something happening and actually doing something about it, right? I really appreciate that. And I want to encourage you, Mr. Bascombe, continue being a patriot. Continue being a patriot of this country. Continue being your brother's keeper. Ingram, any final words, my brother?
Not really. Not really. I think all's been said tonight, and I think the petition's out there for people to sign. And let's just get more people sign the petition. And let's pray for that young man. Keep to pray for him and give him strength in these difficult times, and that we will be successful in all that we do. Earl, do you have anything else to say? No? Okay. Thank you all so much for watching Grenada Matters. Until next time.